Hey there and welcome back to another Dreamworks video. And recently, I've been thinking about the Shrek franchise and all the different characters we've seen rise to prominence thanks to those movies. And that in turn got me thinking about some of the various different heroes and villains of that franchise. And I came to a startling realization. King Harold is just the worst sort of person. Like a truly terrible, terrible man. Frog. Ugh. Either way, strap yourselves in for a rant. Because I am now firmly of the opinion that Harold is a power-hungry, misogynistic, pathetically stupid wet fart of a man. His entire character arc just proves he's the worst. From his backstory that we receive over the course of the various different films, to his actions during Shrek 2, or even his last moments during Shrek the Third, or even his alternate universe counterpart's actions during Shrek Forever After. The dude's a liability, a terrible husband, a terrible father, and probably a terrible king. But with all that being said, let's start from the beginning. Okay, so from what we know of his backstory, Harold started his life as a frog of little renown, and eventually over the course of his life living in the kingdom of far, far away, he saw the Princess Lillian and fell in love with her. No shame in that. I mean, in the movies, she seems like a very kind woman, and I'm sure she was a looker in her day, so I don't blame our amphibian friend one bit. Nor do I blame him for going to the fairy godmother and being transformed into a human temporarily to try and woo her. But I do think it's a bit gross that after he knew her for a while, he never told her that he was a frog. At least, it doesn't seem like he did. So he married her via deception and got his true love's kiss. And then he just went about his life and she was none the wiser as he got her pregnant and ruled over her kingdom. Jesus, the dude took away her ability to consent. And by the time she knew the truth, well, what's she gonna do then? They were old by then and he just sacrificed himself for the family. She couldn't just leave him. It would have been a PR nightmare. So yeah, there's his first demerit point. If my girlfriend was secretly a frog that had magically transformed into a human, I think I'd want to know this information, especially if there's a chance she might turn back one day. I need to have a pond or a tank ready, just in case. Hell, my cat might eat her. And I mean, beyond most people probably not wanting to commit their life to marrying a frog, logistically, it poses a big problem for the kingdom if he turns back. What if another kingdom smells the blood in the water and they decide to invade? What if the peasants decide they don't want to be ruled by a frog? What if they end up in open revolt? It just feels a bit short-sighted to not tell anybody and then just hope for the best. And I very much doubt that the princess would have even refused to marry him based on her characterization in the films. So instead, he just comes across as deeply selfish and short-sighted, putting himself ahead of both the woman he supposedly loves and the kingdom as a whole. Bit of a turd, all things considered. So, apart from his lack of care about the concept of true consent and trust in a relationship, and his lack of foresight about being a frog turned into a man becoming king, depending on how the succession in this kingdom even works, he's also either a power-hungry usurper, or a misogynistic power-hungry usurper. So we know from Shrek the Third that Queen Lillian had a younger brother named Uther, who in turn married Igraine and had a son called Arthur, who we see ascend to the throne during the events of Shrek the Third. Okay, so option 1. The power-hungry Frog King. In this option, the kingdom follows male preference primogeniture, like the UK did until recently. So, in this version of events, after old King Constantine dies, it should have therefore been Uther who becomes king, because he's the only other child besides Lillian that we even know about. But the fact that Harold instead ascends to the throne, in this instance, reeks of usurpation. But that being said, I think this one's probably an unlikely scenario, simply due to the fact that it's never mentioned. And this indicates to me that the kingdom has absolute primogeniture, or equal, in case you don't know what that means. So that means, after her father died, it should have been Lillian who became the ruling queen regnant. Her husband should have just been a simple prince consort type of deal. But instead, he pulls the old switcheroo and just becomes the king, I guess. I mean, maybe this is a William III, Mary II type of deal where they're equal co-rulers, but it certainly doesn't feel that way based on the films. It feels like he calls the shots, and Lillian's just there to hang off his arm and say, "Oh, Harold," when he's getting too worked up. And this means that Lillian, despite being the one who is royal, is no longer considered the hereditary queen. She's just the queen consort. Oof. So clearly, he doesn't really give a shit about his wife's rights and just stole all of them. What a hero. But then, we have a period of relative peace and quiet. He and Lillian have a daughter, and all is right in the world. Until said daughter is cursed to turn into an ogre at night. And so what does Harold do? Why, he secretly goes to the fairy godmother for help, even though in my opinion, She is probably the person who cursed Fiona, but whatever. Anyway, for some reason, he agrees to place Fiona in a remote castle where she'll spend her childhood waiting for a prince to come and rescue her. Okay, there's just so much wrong with this. And yeah, Lillian doesn't look too flash in this section either. But this is a Harold hit piece video, so deal with it. So anyway, he sends his daughter, who isn't that old by the sounds of what she wrote in her diary, to go and live in a remote castle suspended above a volcano. Okay, so the toxic fumes alone would be an awful experience, and the heat, but okay. And yeah, no friends, no family, no interactions, just her and the dragon that lives with her. What a lovely life she's living so far. Thanks, Harold. But not only does he do that, but he also seems to advertise the fact that she's there, which lures a lot of young men to their gruesome death. And yeah, they made their choice, but I feel like putting a dragon there is a bit harsh. Oh, and on top of that, he actually makes a deal that it would be Prince Charming that gets to rescue her. And I'm not sure how he's actually a prince, but whatever. But yeah, he basically sells his daughter to this man. And I'm sure Prince Charming's mum actually gave him a way to get past the dragon without dying, so the whole dragon in the volcano thing seems like it was a setup so Lillian wouldn't be sussed about the whole thing. So he then led these other men to their death for nothing. Shrek was a fluke. He wasn't supposed to be able to rescue her at all. So yeah, contend for Father of the Year by locking his daughter in a volcanic tower, guarded by a dragon with no company, and forced to listen to the gruesome deaths by fire of various different knights that came to save her with the expectation that no matter what, no matter who saves her, she has to marry them and have sex with them and have their babies and ugh. Good one, Harold, you absolute worm, you mole man. And also there is no evidence that he even checked up on her or anything like that. They didn't even find out she was free until Charming turned up and was greeted by the wolf who told him she was on her honeymoon. And so, this brings us to the events of Shrek 2, where after this discovery, Harold sends an invitation to Shrek and Fiona to visit Far, Far Away, and immediately, he's one of the most hypocritical and awful in-laws of all time, hating Shrek for daring to be an ogre, despite him having already saved his daughter's life, and her being clearly in love with him, but okay. And despite the fact that he too was not worthy of marrying into the royal family as he was only a frog before he used the potion. And so, after contributing to the awkward dinner scene, instead of being reasonable, apologising and trying to start fresh, he instead gets intimidated by the fairy godmother and then puts a hit out on Shrek. What a good father-in-law. What a good father. And then he continues to build on his lies and even considers drugging his daughter with a potion that will make her fall in love with the first person she kisses, essentially turning her into a mindless slave with no free will that can be a broodmare for Prince Charming. Once again, this is her father. Imagine even considering doing that to your kid for 1 minute. Ugh! But at least at the end of the second film, he sacrifices his humanity to save Shrek. Yada yada. Everybody's happy. He apologises and it's all good. Hopefully he can redeem himself further in the next one. Except psych, he doesn't. Because as he lays dying in the opening of Shrek the Third, he forgets that even after he dies, his wife should still be the hereditary queen regnant. I mean, it's her family's goddamn kingdom. But maybe she feels like she can't rule properly with him dead and wants to pass it along. So who will Harold choose? Maybe his daughter, whom he's done nothing but wrong over and over again. Maybe he'll announce that she is in fact his heir. A reconciliatory gesture. Nope. You're gonna name her husband the Swamp Ogre with no royal blood or claim to the throne as the king, even though he clearly would never want this at all. Maybe Fiona wouldn't want it either. But she'd be better than Shrek. God damn, Harold. And then when Shrek says no, he chooses Lillian's nephew Arthur instead. Harold. Why do you hate women, Harold? And what's worse is that he never even planned for this eventuality. Why wouldn't Arthur have been raised in the kingdom if he was a potential heir to the throne? Was he just going to let whoever married Fiona have the kingdom? Is that how he thinks this works? Was he going to let Lord Farquaad have the kingdom in the end if he'd married Fiona? Jesus. But at least now he's dead. He can't hurt us anymore. Can he? He can, because in the alternate timeline in Shrek Forever After, he's stupid enough to sign over the rights to his kingdom and his wife's kingdom to Rumpelstiltskin and gets wiped from existence alongside his wife. You know, which leads the kingdom into ruin and decay. Nice one, mate. So yeah, based on all of that, I'd argue that not only is Harold a bad king, a bad father, a bad husband, a bad father-in-law, but also a terrible person. A truly terrible person, and he belongs in the Hall of Shame alongside Lord Farquaad and Rumpelstiltskin and the Fairy Godmother and Prince Charming. If he hadn't been such a dipshit, almost none of the events of the story would have ever happened. So don't mourn his death. He earned it. Good riddance. And so with all that being said, that's the end of the video. And I would like to say, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think about King Harold? You think he's a real piece of shit like I do? Or are you feeling a bit more charitable towards him? A little bit more sympathetic? Maybe somewhere in between? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.